This is the central mystery of the modern world. It's a question that literally dictates the fate of billions of people. Defining whether a child is born into a world of endless opportunity or a world of constant struggle.
And look, we're not talking about some small difference here. This isn't about some people having a nicer car or a bigger house. No, we are talking about a chasm, a vast, life-altering divide that splits our world into two completely different realities.
400 to 1. That's the income gap per person between the richest nations on Earth, like Switzerland, and the absolute poorest, like Mozambique. Just let that sink in for a second. It's a gap so huge, it's almost impossible to really wrap your head around.
But what's absolutely wild is that this is a recent thing. Just 250 years ago, the gap between the richest and poorest was only about 5 to 1. So the explosion from 5 to 1 to 400 to 1, that's a seismic shift in human history that experts call the Great Divergence. Welcome to Animeconomy. Today we're diving deep into David S. Landis's masterpiece, The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, to try and solve the mystery of this great divide.
So here's our game plan. We're going to run this like a true investigation. We'll follow the clues, starting with the very lay of the land, all the way to the corridors of power to figure out why our world became so incredibly unequal. And you're going to want to stick around, because by the end, we will reveal the secret cultural recipe that Landis says is the absolute key to unlocking national wealth.
All right, every good investigation starts with the most obvious suspect, the one that's been staring us right in the face the whole time, the physical environment itself, the very ground beneath our feet.
Landis kicks things off with a truth that's, well, it's a little uncomfortable. We just can't ignore the raw, hard fact that geography gives some societies a massive, totally unearned head start, while it condemns others to a constant, grinding, uphill battle against their own environment.
Think about it. These things just pile on top of each other in the most brutal ways. A temperate climate is a massive gift, but relentless heat? That's not just uncomfortable, it saps your energy, it kills productivity. And worse, that constant heat creates a perfect breeding ground for swarms of insects that wipe out your crops and spread devastating diseases. And finally, water. While some civilizations got lucky and grew up around reliable rivers, others were at the total mercy of chaotic monsoons, droughts, and floods that could wash everything away in an instant. Geography doesn't just set the stage, it writes the entire first act of the story.
But here's the thing. Geography is a huge piece of the puzzle, but it is not the whole story. I mean, plenty of places had decent geography and still fell behind. Something else was going on. And that leads us to the real breakthrough in our investigation, a unique set of circumstances that allowed one small corner of the world, Europe, to just break away from the rest of the pack.
Now, to really get what happened in Europe, we have to look at its biggest rival at the time, China. For centuries, China was the world's undisputed technological superpower. But it was ruled by a single massive imperial state that valued stability above literally everything else. Europe, on the other hand, was a chaotic mess. After Rome fell, it just shattered into dozens of competing kingdoms and city-states. And paradoxically, it was that disunity, that constant, frantic competition that lit the fuse for the economic explosion.
Landis has this incredible term for the Chinese state. He calls it a Moloch state. Imagine a giant, devouring creature with bureaucratic tentacles reaching into every single part of your life. The government controlled everything: salt, iron, even education. It saw any big private business not as a good thing, but as a potential threat to its absolute power, and that just strangled all initiative.
This all ties into a concept called Oriental despotism. The theory is pretty straightforward, actually. To manage these huge agricultural systems like China's massive rice paddies, you needed enormous, centralized water projects. And if you control the water, you control the food. And that control led to this all-powerful bureaucracy that demanded total obedience and just crushed any flicker of private enterprise or personal freedom.
Okay, so let's flip back to Europe, which took this totally different and honestly kind of accidental path. First, it was politically shattered. No single ruler could dominate. So what happened? Rulers had to compete for money. To fund their armies, they had to attract the most productive people: merchants, craftsmen, innovators. And how did they attract them? Well, they had to grant them rights and freedoms, protecting their property. And that led to the final step: enterprise. The key takeaway here is that economic freedom in Europe wasn't some grand idea from a philosopher. It was a messy, accidental byproduct of political competition. And that security let a whole new class of entrepreneurs rise up, confident that the government wasn't just going to swoop in and take all their stuff.
And the results of this new environment? Well, they were game-changing. This freedom created a culture of practical, real-world problem-solving. Just take eyeglasses, for example. This one simple invention from 13th century Italy had a revolutionary impact. I mean, think about that. It literally doubled the productive careers of Europe's most skilled workers, the craftsmen and scribes whose eyes would have failed them in middle age. This was a culture that didn't just have big theories, it built tools that actually changed the world. By the way, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, do me a quick favor and hit that like button, and maybe share it with someone who you think would also be curious about the deep forces that really shape our world.
Okay, so we've looked at the physical evidence of geography. We've looked at the circumstantial evidence of politics. We have gathered all our clues, and now it is time to unmask the culprit. Landis argues that at the very core of prosperity is a specific set of cultural and institutional software, a recipe for success.
And here it is. This is the heart of the entire book's argument. The secret sauce isn't just one thing. It's a combination of ingredients that all create one crucial outcome: trust. You see, when people can trust that their property is secure, they'll invest for the future. When they trust they have personal liberty, they'll follow their ambitions. When they can trust in contracts and a stable government, they'll take calculated risks. And when the culture itself celebrates discovery and hard work, you get an engine of progress that is basically unstoppable. And you know what? This idea is ancient. The Greek historian Herodotus figured this out over 2,000 years ago. People will fight harder, they will work smarter, and they will risk everything when they know that they will get to enjoy the rewards of their success. It's a fundamental human motivation, and the institutions in Europe managed to unlock it on a massive scale.
But there's one last super important cultural ingredient Landis points out: a whole new way of thinking about time itself. See, many ancient societies saw time as a circle, an endless loop of seasons, of empires rising and falling, rinse and repeat. The Judeo-Christian tradition, though, it introduced a sense of linear time, the idea that history is actually moving forward, towards a destination. This created a belief in progress. It fostered a mindset that tomorrow can and should be better than today. And that is a crucial psychological foundation for anyone willing to innovate and invest in the future. Okay, now, we have to confront the dark side of this story. Because the rise of Europe, this great divergence, it was not some peaceful academic process. No. It was written in blood and fire and conquest.
And Landis does not pull any punches here. He is brutally honest. He says flat out that all the noble reasons for European expansion, spreading religion, a civilizing mission, were mostly just a cover for savage greed and violence. The conquerors, he writes, returned bestialities unworthy of beasts to the people they encountered, committing horrors that are hard to even read about today.
And this quote, it just captures the whole tragedy, but from the other side. For the societies that were discovered by Europe, this historical moment wasn't progress. It was an apocalypse. It was the end of their world. Their fear wasn't about being lost in isolation. It was about being found by these powerful, ruthless outsiders.
And that leaves us with a huge, unresolved question that still hangs over us today. The very forces that created our modern, wealthy world were tangled up with conquest, exploitation, and suffering on a colossal scale. So, how do we, today, who benefit from this legacy, reckon with that? How can we strive for a better future, for global progress, while being honest about the immense human costs that were paid along the way? It's a tough one, and I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you stayed until the end, it means you're not just curious, but you're actually committed to understanding how the world really works. And that discipline right there, that alone separates you from the majority. So be sure to subscribe to Animeconomy. Here we turn economics, politics, and power dynamics into clear, visual stories, so you can understand the systems that shape your world. And if you want to explore these ideas even further, you can purchase The Wealth and Poverty of Nations using the link in the description. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one.